Later that night finds Vor lounging in his chateau among the highest clouds of Walaim. He decants a double shot of Thugalanol brandy, something to steady his nerves following the PRT home only minutes earlier. By all accounts, traveling by PRF takes a toll on the body and on the mind. The dull ache surging through Vor's brain serves to reinforce that fact. Even after years of transmission, you may experience less discomfort after a time, but no one is spared completely. Of this, he is certain. Those that say otherwise simply lie. Wishing it were otherwise, he dims his 15 eyes to mentally wrestle with his suffering and vaporizes the surface of the sweet alcoholic balm for his first draft. In front of him, a hollow projection of the Transnet user threshold. He floats calmly before it in stillness, suspended by a hover field. His multiple eyes, heavy with internal distress, fix on the image of an empty search prompt. Solristian, his many-winged Bioijat servitor, busies itself with preparing dinner, while Vor waits for word from the Science Commission team sent to analyze Araya's abandoned compound on Tialadin Nalu. The Pel Apex also awaits news from the Science Commission here on Nevagaim regarding the device he obtained from the avian assassin, in addition to the results of the data forensics report from the remains of the cyborg, Taul. The great Gixen Jael wonders offhandedly if he should cancel his order for the week-long mind probe he ordered for the Earthling. The human almost certainly knows nothing. Feeling restless, with no viable leads on his adversary's identity, motivations, or whereabouts, Vor pulls himself into a comforting spin and cyberpulses a search of Chiolem's name to the Transnet. Still puzzled about his friend's disappearance, the Pel Apex continues to worry that it is somehow related to these attempts on his life. Chiolem knew Vor would be paying a visit to Tialadin Nalu, and aside from Vor himself, the human should have been the only other being in possession of this knowledge. The Pel Apex recalls searching Chiolem's empty compound after the failed attempt on his life. He remembers the entire sub-Earth-Lenian complex being in the same condition as the antechamber, perfectly empty. Every surface perfectly smooth. A thin layer of dust everywhere. After several planetary scans found no artificial power sources on or beneath the planet's crust, Vor ended his search and left Tialadin Nalu to travel to Nevagaim. On his way to the human's Eidolon, before leaving the single-planet system, Vor entertained the notion that an exhaustive search of official and unofficial Gillith star charts would reveal some clue as to where Chiolem might have gone. But this was a fruitless hope. The galaxy was too big, and before purchasing its homeworld, Araya mangled all evidence of its past so completely, even the smallest fact of the human's life needed to be approached with the highest level of suspicion. For the sake of being thorough, however, Vor had his ship run a function scan of Chiolem's Eidolon before strobing out system. Not surprisingly, the scan returned nothing of consequence. The human's gate wasn't programmed to record anything, least of all a resonance transmission, which left Vor stalled at the beginning of his investigation, unable to backtrack the ship of his thwarted assassins, and unable to deduce where Araya had gone. The huge Gixen grinds the fragments of his inscrutable accretion with ire as he thinks on his frustrated efforts. He further dims his 15 eyes, feels the dulling effect of the brandy on the lingering ache from the resonance transmission. His computer nears the completion of its search through the databanks of the entire wedge to satisfy his query. Vor slows his rotation to inhale another draft of atomized brandy. The Gixen Jael's intrinsic relationship with electromagnetic radiation keeps the vapor from pooling around his pores. Vor pulls himself into a gentle spin in the other direction and continues to ponder his current circumstances. Without any actual proof, perhaps this focus on Chiolem as the mastermind behind these attempts on his life is in truth simply concern for his unaccountably missing friend. However, as the worst of all conceivable possibilities, And after the peculiar happenings on Tialaden Nalu, Vor finds it nearly impossible to think that Araya Chiolem doesn't want him dead. The Transpicuous Giant considers his command cube, considers ordering Solristion to prepare the training facility so he can exercise his agitation away. Then suddenly, the Wagoshan Allied Order of Nations warrant for Krellikar appears large in the Transnet's projected foreground, opaque and with bold glowing letters. Vor stops his rotation, vaporizes another layer of liquor to inhale. His 15 eyes flare with sudden interest. Mild surprise crackles along his edges as he looks over the warrant. For as protective as Araya has always been with his identity, the great Gixen hadn't actually expected any results from his search. But this is not Araya, Vor thinks, as he looks through the warrant's image files. At least not as Vor had known the creature. This Krellikar looks completely different, though upon inspection there is a resemblance of a sort. A child, perhaps? Vor had never known Chiolem to sire any offspring, but what was known of the crafty human was irrelevant. Araya had sown so much myth and misdirection with what personal information it allowed to be public, Vor figured anything could be possible where Chiolem's personal life was concerned. Also, while it was conceivable, it was highly unlikely the shared last name was a coincidence. Chiolem was an extremely uncommon human appellation. In fact, Vor had only ever heard or seen the name when it referred to the legendary Trameler. Perhaps it was as he had long suspected, that the surname was an invention. Vor discards the question as immaterial and returns his attention to the Transnet. He considers the projected image of the young human male once again, and chuckles to himself. Araya is much too thoughtful to think simply changing its name after a little reconstructive surgery is enough to confuse or discourage any serious investigation into its identity or location. However, the creature is more than a little megalomaniacal. Vor chuckles again. But no, this is much too sloppy a ruse. If this is Araya's idea of going off the grid, then the human will have to do some considerable work on its ego if it really wants to disappear. Vor browses through Krellikar's warrant to analyze its more inconsequential unclassified information. After a few moments, he cyberpulses an increase to the hoverfield's gain and releases his alignment with the planet's magnetosphere. His 15 eyes bore into Krellikar's image for a few intense seconds. No, Vor decides. This is not his friend. He pauses at that thought. Friend. Vor's kaleidoscopic incertitude contracts. A dangerous sentimental notion sprung from the boredom of retirement. This concept. Friend. Especially with regard to Sub-Gixen. Vor will have to be considerably more careful, he decides, with whom he trusts now. Even his fellow Gixen Jail could be suspect. He will have to explore that line of thought later. To splinter his focus now will only reduce his efficacy. Returning his attention to the Transnet, he looks back over the warrant and inputs his security clearance code to view the classified portions of Krellikar's file. Hours pass while Vor inspects volumes of encrypted Hethwuthu personnel logs and reports from the People's Army of Basamarl. He then watches the private vidcasts of several different Hethwuthu engineers, recordings that just happen to capture pieces of the young Chiolem's time with the People's Corps. Although this is not Araya, Vor thinks, the creature's methods are not too dissimilar, and, now this is curious, no published biometrics exist for this Krellikar. Unusual for such a high-priority, wedge-wide warrant. He thinks of Araya, and of what he knows of the creature's ways. Perhaps this apparently poor attempt to slip out of public view is the point. The bait. It would be characteristically duplicitous of Araya to publish just enough information to entice its would-be captors. No, to lure its prey into unprofitable action. And while its pursuers waste time and energy on false leads, Uriah would observe as they reveal themselves, analyze their vulnerabilities, and finally, destroy them. No. That is fantasy. Uriah Chiolem is either dead or in hiding. It must be as simple as that. This Krellikar, however, is undoubtedly the human's offspring. Vor is convinced of it, and the child's trail is still fresh. The Pale Apex decides he will find the creature. Yes, and through the sun, he will find the father. A glimmer of excitement dances through Vor's prismatic disorientation, and he cyberpulses a call to the Jillith governor of Wagosha to verify the authenticity of the warrant.